From 1568 to 1648, the Dutch fought the 80 Years' War against the Habsburg Spanish Empire, resulting for the first time in an independent Netherlands. It pit the noble House of Orange against the despotic emperors of Spain, steadfast Protestants against the cruelty of the papistry, Paella against Stompot. Well, not quite, but this is going to be fun, so play the music. A quick disclaimer before I get started. The 80 Years' War is obviously a massive period of time with an infinite number of complications, and so saying anything concrete about it becomes very difficult. Some parts of my video may therefore be generalizations or summaries, and there may be exceptions, although my main aim here is to give a general overview of the course of the 80 Years' War, while being as accurate as I can. I'm sure you're gonna love the video nonetheless. This is also a collaboration with another channel, Name Explain, so stay around to find out more about that later on. In 1519, Charles I of Spain became Charles V, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, creating the largest empire in Europe since the time of the Franks. This essentially meant that as well as ruling Spain, southern Italy, parts of the Balkans and Eastern Europe, he ruled over the various principalities of the German states as well. The Habsburg Netherlands had been inherited through his mother, Mary of Burgundy, and were both where Charles was born and grew up, making it an important trading hub on the northern edge of the empire. When Charles V abdicated in 1555, he famously leant not on the shoulder of his biological son and future King of Spain, Philip II, but instead on the shoulder of the young German nobleman William of Orange, who had become an imperial favourite, perhaps sowing the early seeds of conflict between him and Philip II. While Charles had been both King of Spain and the Holy Roman Emperor, his successor to the Spanish throne, Philip, did not inherit the imperial throne, which was an elected position, and as such Philip was a decidedly more Spanish king, spending most of his time in Madrid as opposed to the more mobile court of his father. Communication between the regional government and the central imperial government was slow, however, leading to administrative problems in the Low Countries. In fact, they were simply known as the Les Pays des Pardesas, those countries over there. With the nearby birthplace of the Protestant Reformation in Germany, the Low Countries also became a hotbed for dissident religious views, while the empire staunchly clung to the Catholic faith. In 1566, angry Protestant mobs throughout the Low Countries rose up and in a spate of iconoclasm destroyed thousands of pieces of Catholic art and decorations inside churches and on the streets, becoming known as the Beeldenstorm, the statue storm. These religious reformers were from groups like the Anabaptist Mennonites, following the teachings of Frisian Protestant Menno Simons, whose church can still be visited in my mum's city of Edam. Calvinists, who were one of the largest Protestant groups in the Low Countries at the time, and believed those who would enter heaven had already predetermined to do so. And finally Lutherans, identifying strongly with the teachings of the German monk Martin Luther, whose protest had started the Reformation some 50 years earlier. While Charles had eased his counter-reformation in his later years, the Spanish government in the Netherlands sent Cardinal Antoine Perrenot de Granvelle from France, who reformed the small dioceses into 14 new establishments, making them unpopular with both the Protestants they were burning and the Catholic Church there, who had to foot the bill. While it's important to remember that religion was an important factor for war and the motivation of some for rebelling, it was by no means a clear-cut Protestant-Catholic struggle. Many of the first rebels were Catholics, and there were Protestants who fought against the rebellion as well. This is clearly shown by the mix of Catholic and Protestant signatures on the Compromise of Nobles, whereby members of the aristocracy headed by the like of William of Orange and the Counts of Egmont and Hoorn petitioned Philip to ease his persecution of heretics in the Low Countries. When they delivered their request to the regent Margaret of Parma, she was alarmed by their number, although an aide reassured her with "N'ayez pas peur, madame, ce ne sont que des jeux." "Don't worry, madame, they are just beggars." When Philip rejected the Compromise of Nobles, those in favour of rebelling against his rule agreed they were willing to become beggars in order to serve their people, leading to the naming of the Dutch armed resistance as De Geuzen. With violence in the air, the nobles split, with William of Orange escaping to his German estates outside of Philip's reach, while Egmont and Hoorn stayed to take their chances. Soon after, they were arrested and beheaded by Philip's agents, leading to the former being immortalized by Ludwig von Beethoven some 200 years later, when another southern European despot was attempting to rule Europe. Back in 1567, Spanish set up the Tribunal de los Tumultos, the Council of Troubles, to deal with the upstart nobles and reformers, although it soon became known to the Dutch by a different name, Het Bloedraad, the Blood Council, as the Spanish Fernando Alvarez de Toledo, Duke of Alba, who oversaw it, was ruthless in dealing out heavy-handed justice. Here he is, clearly shown depicted as Death, sitting at the head of the council. With an army of 10,000 elite troops, the Duke began a systematic stemming of any dissident feeling, leading to the further deaths of thousands from both the upper and lower classes. With this, the gauntlet was down, and William of Orange decided to fight back against the Spanish. In Germany, he paid for 3 mercenary armies to be led by him and his brothers. They triumphantly crossed the border and officially began the 80 Years' War. His brother Louis von Nassau invaded from the northeast, defeating a royalist army in Groningen but being defeated himself at the Battle of Jemmingen in Friesland. A second French force of Huguenot Protestants in Artois was pushed out of the Low Countries, whilst William's army had to retreat due to arrears in pay. What we have to remember about the 80 Years' War is that the Spanish Empire was at that time the largest on earth, becoming hugely wealthy because of the gold and silver being transported from the New World, robbed from native peoples like the Incas and Aztecs. Another reason the war went on for so long is due to the advanced nature and size of the Spanish army, parts of which hailed not only from Spain but Portugal, Italy, and even parts of the Low Countries themselves. The Spanish tercios, as they were called, were formidable under the skilled leadership of generals like Alba, Parma and Spinola. Dutch resistance to the Spanish after 1567 can be divided into the mercenary armies raised by William of Orange and his brothers in the neighbouring German states, and the native Dutch resistance within the occupied provinces, on land as the Geuzen and more successfully on sea as the Watergeuzen. While they were simply pirates and freebooters to the Spanish, to the Protestant English they were seen as religious freedom fighters, leading Queen Elizabeth to allow them haven in English ports so as to use them as bases from which to launch their attacks on Spanish shipping. In 1572 the wind changed, however, and Elizabeth had them expelled. In what was either a reckless piece of last-ditch bravery or an extremely lucky judgment, the Watergeuzen converged on the port of Den Briel, which they found practically unmanned by the Spanish, allowing them to capture it. For the first time, the Dutch rebels had terra firma within the Low Countries, as such changing the nature of the war for the next 68 years to come. When a Spanish attempt to retake the city failed, others, though either loyalty to the Republic, persuasion by Dutch agents or capture by the Geuzen, came under rebel control throughout the Low Countries. Crucially, however, the important northern cities of Amsterdam and Schoonhoven remained loyal to the crown, with large Catholic populations, and crucially too, Delft and many southern cities remained neutral for the time being. The Spanish counterattack was swift, however, Alba sending his son Fadrique to lead it in the northeast, while he sacked the south. The brutality with which the Spanish retook rebel cities was shocking. The captured city of Zutphen's citizens were drowned indiscriminately, while when the city of Naarden surrendered, its population laid out tables of food and drink for the Spanish, though it was not enough to stop them being burnt alive inside the city's church. This heavy-handed approach worked against the Spanish, as the early examples steeled rebel cities to put up more of a resistance, as they did in Haarlem, which held out for 8 months, or successfully in Alkmaar, which destroyed the besieging army by releasing the sluice gates, making further attacks on the city impossible. The Royalist army met dogged Dutch defence when it attempted to storm Maastricht in the southern Low Countries, with sapping tunnels being met by counter-sapper tunnels, allowing fighting to continue beneath the ground for months. At one point the besieging army attempted to mine the city, but instead 500 Spaniards lost their lives when it blew prematurely. Despite the city's resistance, it was captured, the siege having reduced a population of 30,000 to 400 in 5 months. Despite these significant setbacks suffered during Fadrique and Alba's counterattack, on the waves the Watergeuzen were running rings around the Spanish fleet, the Battle of the Zuiderzee placing the inland sea under their control and enabling them to blockade Royalist Amsterdam, while the battles of Borcelle and Reimerswaal gave them free rein in Zeeland. Leiden too was besieged by Fadrique's army, and with the failure of Louis and Henry of Nassau's relief force to break through the Spanish lines at Mokerheide, it seemed that the fate of that city too had been failed. However, the inhabitants turned to the oldest weapon the Dutch had available to them, and proceeded to open the sluice gates and flood the land around the city. The incoming tide allowed the Watergeuzen to sail in from Zeeland, finally breaking the siege and the forced fast of the Leidenaren with baskets of salted herring and white bread, which is eaten on the 3rd of October in the Netherlands to remember it to this day. Philip now ran into real trouble at home, having to finance both the war in the Low Countries and against the Ottomans in the east of his empire, which resulted in arrears in pay for the tercios there who had not been able to be paid for 2 years. Disenfranchised with the lack of pay coming from their masters, large parts of the Spanish army of the Netherlands mutinied, sacking the royalist city of Aalst en route to Brussels, enraging the loyalist provinces of the Low Countries, setting in motion a process which ended with the southern loyal provinces signing a peace treaty with the mostly northern rebelling provinces, so as to fight off the marauders together. This pacification of Ghent, as it was called, was a short-lived moment of unity between North and South, Catholic and Protestant in the Netherlands. Willem van Oranje advocated this cooperation of the religious divide in the Low Countries to provide a united front against their common enemy. It was also around this time that the English once again lent their support to the Dutch struggle, escalating the finances and covert troops being sent to the Low Countries. The Spanish turned on their once southern allies, smashing the States General Army at the Battle of Gembloux in 1570. With funds from England, an army was assembled and succeeded in halting the Spanish advance at Rijmenam. When the Spanish agreed to the demands of the pacification of Ghent, agreeing not to station their troops in the southern Netherlands, the alliance split once more, with the Walloon-speaking provinces of Artois and Hainaut, as well as the cities of Lille, Ochy and Douai, formed the Union of Arras, or Atrecht as it's called in Dutch. Opposing them, the northern provinces of Holland, Zeeland, Utrecht, Friesland, Groningen, Overijssel, Drenthe, Brabant, Gelderland and Vlaanderen, as well as the cities of Doornik and Valenciennes, formed the Union of Utrecht. The Spanish tercios made good progress, capturing Maastricht and Kortrijk soon after each other, prompting William of Orange to offer lordship of the Dutch to the brother of the French king Henry III, to better offer them protection against Philip. So on the 26th of July 1581, the Northern Dutch Union of Utrecht declared its independence from Spain in the Act of Abjuration, placing it under the jurisdiction of François, Duke of Anjou, Prince of France. He proved unable to stem the advance of the tercios, however, the Dutch watching helplessly as Newport and Dunkirk fell without any resistance to the Duke of Parma, who now commanded an army of 60,000 strong. The Duke of Anjou grew impatient with the Dutch government and decided to seize power for himself in Antwerp, although the citizens there massacred his troops in the streets when the coup went awry, the Duke barely escaping with his life. With the evacuation of Anjou's French troops from the south, Parma consolidated Spanish power over it once more, causing an influx of Protestant refugees to flood into the still independent Dutch provinces to the north, one of the factors contributing most to the Dutch Golden Age that would last for much of the 17th century. Meanwhile, the assassination of the most prominent figurehead of the rebellion put the Dutch cause in jeopardy. On the 10th of July 1584, at his home in the Prinsenhof in Delft, when he was coming down the stairs to the dining hall, he was greeted by a Burgundian Catholic called Balthasar Gerards, posing as a French nobleman who proceeded to shoot him in the chest with twin wheel-lock pistols. To this day you can still visit Delft and see the holes in the wall where the balls killed William. In an effort to replace their leader and regain the initiative after his death, the rebels besieged Queen Elizabeth to become Queen of the Dutch, although once again she declined. However, the role of leader was passed on to one of her most trusted councillors, Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, who arrived in the Netherlands in 1485 to oversee the continuation of the war effort. The arrival of Leicester brought an influx of much-needed English troops to reinforce the Dutch and mercenary garrisons, and his position in England as the ally and representative of the Puritans sat well with hardcore Dutch Calvinists who were prominent in provinces like Utrecht and Friesland. As it stood, the rebels controlled the provinces of Holland, Utrecht, Zeeland and Friesland, holding tenuous sway over parts of Groningen outside the city, the area known in Frisian as the Ommelanden, as well as parts of Overijssel and Gelderland, and pieces of Brabant and Flanders. Even though the two southern provinces of Brabant and Flanders were not technically controlled by the Dutch, they were still represented in the government, a fact to which Leicester as the new head disagreed with and promptly changed, from which time the rebelling provinces could be called the Dutch Republic, while those provinces to the south formed what would for nearly a century be the Spanish Netherlands. With Allied advances, the English garrisoned towns in the northeast like Zwolle, Zutphen, Deventer and Arnhem, although morale proved so low that they soon defected to the Spanish, handing over these hard-won possessions only months after they had been captured. Leicester's hardline Protestant support base in Utrecht claimed virtual independence, much to the annoyance of the adherents of William of Orange's tolerant religious peace ideal. When Leicester returned from England, he seized the towns of Gouda and Schoonhoven, failed to arrest William of Orange and prominent statesmen in Den Haag, and did not succeed in convincing the population of Amsterdam to join his cause, leading to his departure for England in late 1587. For the first time since the start of the rebellion some 20 years earlier, the Dutch now seriously considered self-rule, as opposed to offering their overlordship to a foreigner, heralding some 2 centuries of republican government for the Netherlands. One party in this new republican system support the right of those who would become the stadhouders of the republic, those princes of the House of Orange, although crucially they were not monarchs until after the restoration to self-rule, following the defeat of Napoleon Bonaparte in 1815. These were the Prinsgezinde, known in English as the Orangists or perhaps Royalists. The party countering that of the Orangists came about because of a remonstrance written by an Englishman, decrying the Dutch provinces for abandoning their legitimate Prince Philip in favour of self-rule. Francois Franck responded in kind by citing the age-old rights of the Low Countries, that in fact the Republic had always been in existence, and therefore needed no proclamation nor a monarch to practice their tyranny upon the people, as the previous rulers of the Dutch had done. This formed the ideological basis of the Staatsgezinde, or Republican Party, being upholders of arguably the first modern republic in Europe and world history. In England, this period is famous for the arrival of the Spanish Armada in the English Channel, which attempted to sail from Spain to the English Channel, where it would pick up an army of 30,000 strong in Flanders. While the English are very proud of their defeat of the Armada and never afford much thanks to anyone else for it, the Dutch Navy and Watergeuzen also played a critical role in ensuring that England was not invaded in 1588. Around the Flemish coast and the waterways of Zeeland, the depths of the water was far too shallow for the large galleons of the Armada to function, so to pick up the soldiers on the coast they would have had to send much smaller transport ships to ferry them. However, these waters were thoroughly patrolled and controlled by the smaller, faster and shallower-bottomed Dutch fly ships, who made such an attempt impossible in the coastal area where the Armada could not go, especially dooming any hope of an English invasion from the start. Thereafter, the English and Dutch navies proceeded to defeat the hand-to-hand combat-built Spanish galleons in several key engagements in the Channel, such as at Gravelingen. At that time, there were key figures in the political land Dutch Republic. One was Johan van Oldenbarnevelt, who was land advocate of Holland, although in reality he had much control over the government, which did a lot of good, as he seemed the only one capable of stopping it collapsing in on itself into multiple separatist states. Working closely with Oldenbarnevelt was the son of William of Orange, Maurits of Nassau, who would become perhaps the most famous and successful Dutch tactician of the entire war. As the Spanish became embroiled in yet another French religious conflict, Maurits of Nassau and his brother Willem Louis began a sweeping reform of the Dutch army, turning it into an unorganized mishmash of various Protestant militias from across Europe to a well-paid, well-trained, highly effective fighting force. Sharpshooters were soon equipped with more modern muskets, leading to countermarch in files by the constant repetition and discipline instilled in them by regular drilling. It was only much later that other European armies would follow suit, putting the Dutch army head and shoulders above many of its neighbours. Knowing that the Spanish had fortified the major southern strongholds, Maurits also greatly expanded the Dutch artillery, adding many new cannons to his force and using soldiers rather than press-ganging local civilians to dig his siege trenches to afford a better quality of protection to his attackers. These tactics proved decisive throughout the Netherlands during the campaigns of the 1590s, with fortresses and cities like Groningen, Steenwijk, Deventer, Zutphen, Nijmegen, Breda and Hulst falling to the Dutch, often through a mass pulverization of the walls by Maurits's enlarged artillery presence. A further blow to the Spanish came once again on the sea, this time bringing the war far too close to home for Philip's liking, when a combined Anglo-Dutch force, the English famously being led by the Earl of Essex and Walter Raleigh, sailed to Spain and captured the city of Cadiz. For the first time, a Spanish city now suffered the same fate as many Dutch ones had during the course of the war up to that point, as all its valuables were taken from its streets and into the keels of the Allied ships in the harbour, who had on their arrival successfully avoided the burning Spanish fleet meant to keep them from entering it. The effects of the raid on Cadiz were so large that it is believed to be the main reason why, in 1596, the Spanish government declared bankruptcy once again. While the Spanish had been gathering steam in the Netherlands, the bankruptcy disabled the possibility of further reconquests, although the commander of the royalist force at the time, Archduke Albert, saw an opportunity to seize the city of Toulon. An Anglo-Dutch army fell upon his rearguard, however, pitting the elite Spanish tercios against the newly drilled Dutch rank and file, with devastating effect. The main role during the battle was played by the Allied cavalry, who after defeating their enemy counterparts smashed into the tercios' flanks and drove them from the field in disarray. After further Dutch successes, the Spanish tried to break through to Holland by launching a full-scale assault against the city of Zaltbommel, where my great-aunt Petunka lived. The Anglo-Dutch defenders held enough for a combined Dutch force of some 10,000 men to force the commander Francisco de Mendoza to lift the siege. The Spanish retreat was plagued by low morale, disease, disorganization and desertion, something von Oldenbarnevelt and the Dutch Republic's government was more than happy to exploit by planning their most daring incursion into occupied territory yet. From a tactical point of view on the ground, however, and one shared by Maurits of Nassau, it was a foolhardy, rash plan that could only ever end in a costly failure. While I won't cover it in this video, this is often seen as the start of the fatal deterioration of the once fruitful friendship of Maurits of Nassau and Johann von Oldenbarnevelt. Dunkirk had long been a hotbed of anti-Dutch piracy, although it was many miles behind Spanish-controlled land in what is now the northeast of France. The Anglo-Dutch army under the reluctant leadership of Maurits set off from Zeeland, landing on the Flemish coast and marching westwards towards its target. However, when they reached the town of Newport, they found that a Spanish army had caught up with them and sprung a trap on Maurits, cornering him between them and the sea. If there was ever going to be a test for the new model Dutch army, it would be here at Newport. A crucial stage of the battle took place on a hilltop held by English musketeers, practicing Maurits's reformed volley fire tactics against the oncoming elite Spanish tercios of Bilar and Monroy, holding them off the hill and inflicting heavy casualties on them as they advanced. Despite this, a final Spanish push of pikemen forced them from their position, and for a moment it seemed that the push of pikemen would signal the defeat of the Allied force. However, the Spanish units atop the hill had become so disorganized, with pikemen mixed in with harquebusiers, let alone their exhaustion after having pushed the English from their positions for several hours. A well-timed charge by a small number of Maurits's reserve cavalry unexpectedly broke the morale of the Spanish on the hill, who started a slow retreat that was forced into a full-blown rout when Maurits's cousin Louis smashed a final charge by the tired Dutch cavalry into the rear of the Spaniards. While the battle proved an affirmation of the tactical advances made by the Dutch army since the start of the war, it was tactically void of worth, as Dunkirk remained and the Dutch had paid a heavy price of some 2,000 dead, as opposed to around 3,000 Spanish casualties killed and captured. 2 years after the Battle of Newport in 1602, the VOC was founded, the Verenigd Oost-India Company, the Dutch East India Company, resulting in private shares being bought by wealthy merchants in the Republic. The VOC would continue to play a crucial role in both Dutch and world history, being the first modern multinational corporation, and the first to be listed publicly on the stock exchange, and soon its merchant fleet was larger than that of England, France, Spain, Portugal, and the German states combined. In part thanks to the interest of the VOC, by the onset of the 17th century, the Dutch were able to wage war against their enemies outside of Europe. The Portuguese, whose crown had been combined with that of Spain during this time, bore the brunt of this, being attacked in their colonies or having them taken from them by the Dutch in places like Brazil, Sri Lanka, Mozambique, Taiwan and Indonesia, while they would go on to found their own settlements in the Americas, Africa and Asia, laying the foundations for the Dutch Empire. Simple acts of piracy were legalized by the Dutch, like the capture of the Santa Catarina by 3 VOC ships in 1603. Although soon they started to seize entire colonies, as in Amboina in the East Indies, becoming the second Dutch settlement in what is today Indonesia. Meanwhile, in the Low Countries, the Spanish focused all their efforts on the last Republican enclave in Flanders, the city of Ostend, while Dutch forces in the northeast captured the strongholds of Lochem and Grave in the east and Sluis in the south. With the arrival of new Spanish General Spinola, the Catholic city of Oldenzaal once again opened its gates to the Republic, to the Royalists, ensuring the war in the east would continue. The following year, Spinola's force outmaneuvered Maurits of Nassau's, capturing parts of Gelderland in a move that once again showed the vulnerability of those living in the Republic's interior. However, he would not press his advantage, as in 1609 the Spanish and the Dutch finally sat around the negotiation table, signing a ceasefire on the 9th of April in the city of Antwerpen. Now I know what you're thinking, and yes, to this point the two sides have only been fighting for 41 years, and not the promised 80 as it said on the tin. But this video has been going on for an incredibly long time, and my voice and national ego quite frankly need a rest. For the next 12 years, the two sides would remain at peace, the Dutch and Spanish both using this time to construct a line of forts, stretching on the Republican side from places like Bourtrange in Groningen through Zwolle, along Heusden and into Zeeland at Geertruidenberg, and at the important southerly location of Bergen op Zoom, Hout Vroom, and Sluis. Many of these forts were feats of engineering, being beautifully constructed in a unique fashion given the lack of suitable building materials throughout much of the Low Countries. Lots of these forts can still be seen and visited today in a similar state to how they were initially built during the late 16th and early 17th centuries. If people are interested, I can actually do some recording at one of these sites in Naarden when I'm next in the Netherlands. The interwar period was also one in which the Republic bolstered its army, trebling in number from 1588 to 1607 to encompassing a number of over 50,000 troops of Dutch, German, English, Swiss and Scottish stock. So really, the 80 Years' War can be split into the first 41 years from 1568 to 1609, before the 12-year truce lasting until the renewal of hostilities in 1621, which in turn came 3 years after the start of a new religious war in Europe called the 30 Years' War. Speaking of all these wars, I wonder why they never named them after anything other than the amount of years in them.
Actually, a lot of wars are named for different reasons, like the later Anglo-Burmese Wars or King William's War.
Hey, Patrick, where did you come from?
I'm a history YouTuber, kinda. We can just jump in and out of videos as we please.
I knew I should have turned my Bluetooth off. Now you're here, why not tell us a little bit about why all of these wars have different names?
Well, if you come over to my channel Name Explain and click the card in the top right hand corner of the screen, you can watch my video on how do we name wars, where I talk about all sorts of conflicts stretching from the Gaelic Wars of Julius Caesar to the Cold War of more modern times.
Sounds cool. I mean, cold. Why not go check it out? Alright guys, so thanks a million for watching. I really hope you have enjoyed this video about the 80 Years' War. As I said at the start, it's not the entire war, it's most of the war, but the last bit from sort of 1621 to 1648 really falls under the same kind of war as the 30 Years' War, which is also a very interesting topic. Now if you want me to make a video on that, then make sure to give this one a thumbs up, share it with a load of your friends, let's get some views and likes, because yes, I am now one of those cringy YouTubers who asks for views and likes. Let's smash that like button down below, and I might make a video about the 30 Years' War, if you ask me nicely. So I do hope you've enjoyed this video. Definitely go and check out Name Explain. Really awesome channel, awesome guy. It's been great working together with him. It was his idea to do this actually, and I know you guys have been asking me since I started the channel, fam, do the 80 Years' War, do the Dutch Revolt, do all of this, and thanks to Name Explain this was possible. Go and check out his video on how wars get their names, as well as his other stuff, because I think you'll really enjoy it. So thanks for watching. Once again, I have been History with Hilbert, and this has been my video all about de overwinning van Stamppot over Paella.